Hi guys, it is Miss Saul, Head of English at King Alfred's Academy again. Today I'm here to talk you through the first of two videos for this week. The first video is your feedback lesson, if you like, on the analytical paragraphs you wrote for us a couple of weeks ago now on remains and exposure, helping you to implement your target, your whole class feedback targets that your teacher has given you. The second video will then go on to help you develop your analytical writing to show a much more precise understanding of how a poet is communicating ideas. But that's what the second video is going to show you. We'll now focus on this first video. Okay. Okay guys, so what are we hoping to achieve by the end of this week's videos? There are two this week. One to help you go through the feedback lesson, and then one to help you go through how to further develop your analytical paragraphs so that you can show an even more precise understanding of what the poet's trying to show us and how he's doing that. So by the end of this week, you have implemented your targets from your whole class feedback sheet given to you by your teacher through Show My Homework into a new analytical paragraph on the poem Extract from the Prelude, which was the poem we looked at last week. We will also then go on to learn how to write a more detailed analytical paragraph by not only providing a statement and a supporting quotation and then an explanation of the inferences that quotation gives us, but also by providing a more detailed explanation of the specific connotations of key words. So connotations just means the ideas we associate or link with the words, the intended effects the poet's trying to deliberately have by using these words and images, and then further developing our evidence of the poet communicating these ideas, either by providing another quote from the poem that also we feel also shows us the same ideas, or by further developing our explanation of what the quote we've already provided shows us in relation to the theme that we are exploring. Okay, by the end of these two videos, you will then submit online via Show My Homework to your teacher a full analytical paragraph about the poem Extract from the Prelude, which will be more detailed using the whole of Squiced so that your teacher can see what you've done. Okay. So just a very quick reminder, this is what we did a few weeks ago, so it should be quite familiar with you now, of how to use SQI, statement, quotation and inference, to help you write a successful sort of foundation to an analytical paragraph. So basically, if you remember, a statement helps you to show what it is you're going to prove the poet is showing and suggesting in relation to a theme explored in the poem. Your quotation is going to help you to show which phrases in the poem has helped you to work out the one thing that the poet is showing or suggesting, leading you to basically make the claim that you've given in your statement. And then the inference helps you to show that you've understood exactly what's being suggested and hinted at through the imagery and ideas that's being presented in the phrases within the quote that you've provided, and how this has led you to make the statement that you have given at the start of your paragraph. Okay, so hopefully that's somewhat familiar to you as we've done this before with remains and exposure. So I'm going to pause on this for a little while. Please do pause this video at this point because this is a very overwhelming slide, so I do understand that. However, what this is in the middle is a waggle SQI analytical paragraph about exposure. And then all around the edges in the boxes are each and every target your teacher could have given you about this. Now, these will not all apply to you, okay? So what you need to do is you need to look at the whole class feedback sheet that your teacher gave you, and there should be 2 or 3 targets on there that you need to focus on and you and your classmates need to focus on. So you need to identify which 2 or 3 are relevant to you, and then you just need to worry about those, okay? And I've tried to indicate in this waggle paragraph in the middle where those targets can be seen to be implemented. On your whole class feedback sheet, you will also remember that there is actually a YouTube link next to each target, which will take you to the original video we used when we were writing about remains and exposure and recap for you exactly how to write that part of SQI. Okay, so it will take you step by step again how to do that if you need a reminder or to refresh and recap how to do that. So this is sort of going to take you a little while to get your head around and really feel that you understand how to implement your targets. So I suggest that you pause on this video for now and have a look back through your whole class feedback sheet, identify the targets you need to focus on, maybe go and watch just the little snippets of the other video to remind yourself how to do that before you move on with this video today. Okay? Okay, so what we're going to do today is to write a new analytical paragraph about extract from the prelude, the poem we looked at last week. We're going to explore the theme of the power of nature, particularly over man, how nature has power over us in different ways. And basically, the idea is that in this paragraph, you are going to implement your whole class feedback targets in the statement, quote, and inference. And then I'm going to help you further develop your analytical paragraph writing by showing you what to next add on to your paragraph to make it even more detailed and in-depth and therefore much more successful. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through statement, quote, and inference again, but not quite in as much detail as I did last time. So if you do need that detail, as I said, on your whole class feedback sheet, there are links to a more detailed step-by-step explanation of how to build a statement, how to build a quotation, and how to build an inference section of your analytical paragraph. However, I am going to model doing this with extract from the prelude. And as we did before, I'm going to do a statement and then I'm going to ask you to write a new statement about the same poem but on a different idea, and then a quote and then an inference. So it will be I do and then you do repeatedly. Okay, so my first statement then is about extract from the prelude, and as always I start with in his poem Extract from the Prelude. So I'm naming the poem. Wordsworth, the poet, suggests that nature is more powerful than man and can have a psychological effect on him. So remembering that psychological just means mental, so it affects his mind and how he thinks about things. So firstly, as I said, I've clearly named the poem I'm going to be writing about. Then I clearly name the poet who wrote the poem, showing my knowledge. And then I make one clear claim regarding what the poem is suggesting and showing us in relation to the theme that the poet is exploring. So in this case, the theme that the poet is exploring is the power of nature. Okay, so I've got the word nature in that bit to clearly show I know what theme the poet is exploring. Okay. So as always, remembering that once we've written this, each part of our analytical paragraph, it's worth just having a quick reread to check as a whole the sentence makes sense. Always worth doing that quick check. So yeah, in his poem, Extract from the Prelude, Wordsworth suggests that nature is more powerful than man and can have a psychological effect on him. Great, makes sense. Let's move on. So now I would like you to write me a statement about extract from the prelude. So you're going to do it in these clear steps. Firstly, clearly write the name of the poem you're going to write about. Next, clearly name the poet that wrote the poem, still Wordsworth. And then finally, make one clear claim regarding what the poet is suggesting or showing us in relation to the theme of the power of nature and its effect on man. So I'm going to suggest that you pause here to write your statement, which will be the first part of a much longer paragraph eventually. I'm going to help you build it up step by step. I have given you some ideas though if you get stuck. So I've given you basically some hints of things that you could claim to then embed in your sentence. So Wordsworth is trying to show us, with regard to the theme of the power of nature, man finds nature intimidating and frightening. So he feels like nature is much more powerful and it scares him. Okay. And nature's domain, so what nature rules, if you like, is much vaster, much bigger than man's. Okay, so you can use one of those ideas and put it into your statement if you're struggling to think of anything that you could claim other than what I've already done. Okay, so pause here and write your statement now, remembering to check it once you've written it to make sure it makes sense as a whole sentence. Okay, great. So we've got our statement. Excellent. Okay. So now, obviously, as we know, we then need to go on to support our statement with evidence in the form of a quote. Okay. So if you remember, a quote is a phrase or group of words and phrases from the poem that helped you to work out the thing that the poet is showing or suggesting, leading us to make the claim in the statement that we have. Okay, and this needs to be embedded, so put into a full sentence explaining when in the poem it was said and the context it was said in. So what was happening in the poem at the time to explain why it was being said. Okay, so I'm still on extract from the prelude. I will be on that the whole way through this video. I'm still on the power of nature as the theme, again, all the way through this video. That's the theme I'm going to be on today. So again, I've written a sort of waggle, if you like, of the quotation that I'm going to use embedded into a sentence. So again, I'm just going to talk you very quickly through how I've built this quotation up. So firstly, I start with a clear sentence stem or sentence starter, if you like, to show that you are going to provide evidence for your statement. So e.g., this is implied or suggested when. So I started with this is implied when, okay? The next bit then is to embed your quote within your sentence, so putting it within a full sentence as you say what is being stated or described. Don't forget your quotation marks around the words you are quoting. We do that occasionally, so let's try and remember our quotation marks. So I've put, he describes how huge and mighty forms moved slowly through the mind when he recalls the night he rode out into the lake for many days to come. So that last bit, finally, I am explaining what had happened just before, or at the same time in this case, or just after, to fully show you understand why the quotes support the claim you've made in the statement and why that line is being said in the poem, right? So in this case, the line is being said because he's recalling the night he rode out into the lake, days after that's happened over and over again. Okay, so lastly, remember, check, reread, does it make sense of the whole sentence? So let's read it out. This is implied when he describes how huge and mighty forms move slowly through the mind when he recalls the night he rode out into the lake for many days to come. Yep, again, makes sense, explained why he was saying it in the poem at the time, and also supports the quote, this idea that he feels nature is quite powerful and quite daunting, if you like. So it has a psychological effect on him. Okay, so that's our quotation for my statement. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is to write a quotation to support the statement you have written yourselves. Okay, so you have to look back at the statement you've just written on your page and follow the steps again to now write a quote to support the statement. So you're going to start with a clear sentence stem or sentence starter, either this is implied or this is suggested when. Then you're going to embed your quote, so when he says or when he describes how he, or when he describes that he saw, and then the quotation. Okay, don't forget your quotation marks. And then finally explain what happened at that same time or just before or just after to show you understand why the quote's being said and what was happening in the poem at the time it was being said. So I've tried to help you as much as I can by giving you some ideas to help if you get stuck. So I've given you all the quotes that the video on the prelude gave you last week. So you can then try and pick one of these that you think best supports the statement that you've given. So we've got one summer evening led by her. I unloosed her chain. A huge peak, black and huge, upreared its head, just means like brought its head up quite high. And I dipped my oars into the silent lake. So think about which of these quotes you could use to prove the statement you have previously written. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to ask you to pause this video here whilst you write your quotation, and then remember, once you've done this, to reread it to check it makes sense as a whole sentence. Okay, guys, so how to write a successful inference. Again, we went over this in the last video. So if you remember, an inference is an explanation of what has just been suggested or hinted at through the imagery and ideas presented in the quote you've just given, and how and why this has led you to make the claim in the statement that you've made. Okay, so again, I've done one. Here's one I did earlier, if you like. It's a waggle. And I'm just going to talk you through how I built this up. So it says, this creates an image of the speaker being tormented by the memory of the frightening mountains for days after he saw them, constantly picturing them in his head, almost like they gave him waking nightmares because they were so big and mighty. It suggests that they made him feel insignificant, meaning not important at all. Okay, and small in comparison, and that this troubled his thoughts and played on his mind. Had this psychological effect. As such, the poet is clearly showing that the size and power of nature had a negative psychological effect on him. It affected him mentally in a bad way. Okay, so how did I build this? Firstly, I start by explaining the image my quotation created in my head. So it makes me picture. So this creates an image of in my head. Then I explained what this is hinting at or suggesting, and how this has helped me to get to the conclusion that I've drawn, the claim that I've made in my statement. What has it made me think, in other words? So in this case, it's made me think he's being tormented by the memory of nature, and what he saw, and he keeps picturing it, and it sort of traumatized him, if you like. It's made him feel bad and scared for days to come. Okay, and then finally, I've explained what it is the poet's trying to demonstrate here. So, sorry, that says a particular effect of war. It shouldn't be that. It should be a particular effect of nature. Okay, so what is he trying to show us about this particular effect of nature? In this case, it's had a negative psychological effect on him. And I've explained that quite clearly. Okay. Once we've finished, we're going to reread it and check it makes sense as a whole. So this creates an image of the speaker being tormented by the memory of the frightening mountains for days after he saw them, constantly picturing them in his head, almost like they gave him waking nightmares because they were so big and mighty. It suggests that they made him feel insignificant and small in comparison, and that this troubled his thoughts and played on his mind. As such, the poet is clearly showing that the size and power of nature had a negative psychological effect on him. Yep, definitely makes sense. Brilliant. Moving on. So, of course, I'm going to ask you to have a go now at writing a sentence in which you explain the inferences you've made from the quote you've provided, making sure that this all supports the statement that you gave about extract from the prelude. So here are the 3 steps again to follow to help you build up your inference section. Start by explaining the image your quotes create in your head, what it makes you picture, then explain what's being hinted or suggested at, and how this has helped you to get to the claim that you've made. And then what the poet is trying to demonstrate about the particular effect of nature. Again, it says war there. Remember, it's nature, and how he or she is showing this. Pause the video, have a go at writing this. Again, there's ideas at the bottom here to help you. So think about what the quote you've provided makes you picture in your head, what it makes you think and feel about nature and its effect on the man in the poem, the boy in the poem, and what this makes you think the poet's trying to show us about nature. Okay, jot down your ideas first before trying to write it into full sentences. Much easier at that point. And remember, once you've finished writing it, to just reread it and check it makes sense as a whole. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to ask you to pause the video here so that you can add to your already written statement and quote and add your inference section now. Thank you. Okay, so we've written a statement, we've written a quotation, we've written inference, we've now got the solid foundations of an analytical paragraph. So we'll bring this all together to create that in order for it to be quite successful. So for instance, in mine, I've brought my statement, my quote, and my inference together to read, in this poem, extract from the prelude, Wordsworth suggests that nature is more powerful than man and can have a psychological effect on him. This is implied when he describes how huge and mighty forms move slowly through the mind, when he recalls the night he rode out into the lake for many days to come. This creates an image of the speaker being tormented by the memory of the frightening mountains for days after he saw them, constantly picturing them in his head, almost like they gave him waking nightmares because they were so big and mighty. It suggests that they made him feel insignificant and small in comparison, and that this troubled his thoughts and played on his mind. As such, the poet is clearly showing that the size and power of nature had a negative psychological effect on him. Okay, so that's the end of this first video. What we have successfully done is write a new foundational analytical paragraph about extract from the prelude, implementing our whole class feedback targets, and making sure that we have built up a really solid statement and then quotation and an inference. In the next video, which I recommend having a break after this one before going on to the next video, but in the next video, we will build on the statement, quote, and inference you have already written just now about extract from the prelude, and I will teach you step by step how to add on to that to provide an even better, even more precise, detailed analysis of what the poet is conveying to us, what he's trying to show us, and how. Okay, so that's what the second video in this week's assignment is going to help you to do. And so I look forward to you joining me on that video shortly. Perfect. Have a great break, guys, and I'll speak to you again soon.